What's up, everybody? Hilariously, I unmuted Jordan just in time for him to be like swatting a fly or something in the background.
I got a mosquito. He was in
nice.
He was in my area trying to get me. I said, "Oh no, friend, I got you this time."
Jordan ends lives. # live evil. Welcome everybody for 100 Talk. For 100 Talk.
Your opening, Cole. That was good.
Welcome to 100 Talk. I'm Cole. That's Jordan. We are powered by Rip It Energy Fuel. As always, I like saying as always now. Now that this has been official for a while, look at the can. Beautiful can of G-Force for me tonight. Best tasting energy drink in the world. If you want to try it right now on their site, you can use the code TCL20 to get free shipping on Tribute Cherry Lime all month. And it's a good flavor. And it's only $1 a can. So highly recommend it. Highly recommend you sip the rip.
Stupid.
Anyway, we're here to talk 100 Thieves LCS as always. And this weekend is one where we need to parse out like what is like which feelings are valid? Which feelings can we validate right now? And which ones do we have to just say, you know what? Get them next time, bud. There's going to be that happening in this very podcast. Because it was kind of frustrating, not going to lie. Jordan, your frustration meter on a scale of 2 to 7.
Ooh. That is an odd numbered scale. It's like a 5, which I'm embracing the frustration. and let me just tell you, it's not like, I think it's good to be frustrated, right? That can be a positive emotion. Since I have so much control over how the game goes and what we can do better next time, it's really positive for me to hold that inside myself.
Yeah.
But it feels like there's just this big what if in my heart, in my soul, and specifically in my Friday and Sunday of last weekend that you wish you get those back, but you don't.
You don't. So there's going to be significant feelings of frustration that we sort through as a family. We are a family. We're your dads. You're our kids. We're all 100 Thieves fans. We're going to get through that. And sometimes the best way to get through something is to look your problem right in the eyes. So if you are feeling frustration, let's go ahead and talk about the apparel drop from this past weekend. Of course, the No Camping collection had its drop on Saturday. Jordan, would you like to quickly model what you're wearing?
I would love to. Once again,
yes.
This is not... I don't have like the most rapid shipping on the planet. This is pre-ship. But yes, if you were exceedingly lucky, you could get your hands and be having one of these on your body here pretty soon.
Now that was one of the items that sold out the quickest. We just wanted to spend a couple minutes talking about the drop experience, just because we know a lot of people were successful with some things, unsuccessful in others, and drops are always an exciting time. And you know what? We haven't had a true honest to goodness drop for a very long time. I think it was February, right? That numbers collection happened. The jerseys were, kind of a different story. It wasn't the same drop experience. So I gotta say, like, I still think that over time, the technological side of the drops has improved rapidly. And we've gone from a place where, it'd be very unpredictable what was able to happen. Like, I don't know if my add to cart button is actually going to show up, to being fairly reliable. The queuing system working a lot better. The site hasn't crashed in a long time, which happened in a couple of those drops. Things seem much more quick, much more responsive. So on that side, I think we all can agree that we're happy about that. Like, there's an occasional blip here or there for sure.
Yep.
But
it used to be that everybody experienced some sort of blip, which maybe means that it wasn't even a blip. There's always something. It's just a question of, was it so severe that your order didn't process or that you got kicked out of your cart or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, I agree. These last couple have been silky smooth.
Yep. Now,
so fast.
The problem, that's the problem, right? Is the quicker technology means quicker drops. Now, drops have always been pretty fast, but in the first few drops, if you were there, you got what you wanted. Okay.
Yep.
now I think with the extension of the items in the drop, like now we're up to 14 pieces in a single drop, right? It becomes much harder for somebody, especially if you want to add a whole bunch of pieces, to add them all to your cart and check out. And then, what always happens, and this is a particularly frustrating thing about Shopify for me, is you start getting through the checkout process, and then if they run out of stock on something, you're kind of reset. It's like, oh, there's a problem. That is now sold out. Try again. And that kind of repeats. And if you get stuck in that loop, you can really fall down and miss out on a lot of stuff, which is frustrating.
Yeah, I went for the white Nalgene and it was gone. I think I clicked checkout at 2:01. I was in the queue at 2:01. It was gone at 2:01. And I did get bounced back. And there was a moment where I was like, oh no, it's going to reload and everything's going to be gone. And I probably wasn't too far off from having that happen. So
yeah,
you kind of got to gamble if you want to go for the stuff you think might be more limited.
Now I have to say, I am someone with hardwired fiber internet gigabit at my house. I had a great drop. Got everything I wanted, thankfully. But that hasn't always been the case. I know specifically with the glitch T drops, that was when I got stuck in that loop for a while, missed out on several items, and had to go the eBay route on some things, which is not always fun, and it always hurts your wallet. That's the thing you can rely on. But so yeah, I think though, like, my biggest surprise after the numbers collection, which I think had mixed reviews from people aesthetically, right? It was like, this isn't really my thing. It's maybe too basic. It wasn't too basic for me. I actually kind of like that, but I understand where people are coming from if they're like, oh, this is just like 100 in Helvetica font or whatever. There was definitely that sentiment out there. When this drop happened, there's definitely a split between the more like wild part of the design, right? Like the no camping branding, and it's colorful and it's all over, and then there's more like just basic items like the long sleeve tees, the shorts and the pants. So I truly felt like this was something that had your thing there. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that was very good. But I still expected it to not sell quite as fast.
Yeah.
I think the resale market for 100 Thieves stuff has generally started to flatten. If you kind of just like keep your eye on eBay or whatever, prices kind of have there's still a markup, right? It's still a limited product. It's still hard to get. There's still a significant markup. But for most items, it's really not that bad. It really started turning when they had the tricolor windbreaker, I think, was one of the first items that kind of broke through. And usually when you see that, it's like, oh, some resellers might like shy away from it. If we are to believe what's been said by, I think, Jackson in the Discord, that not the like botting wasn't really a problem with this drop or anything. It still moved so fast, man, and so many people missed out on some things. So that is a heartbreaker for you guys. But I'm telling you right now, like, getting your stuff in the drops, it's like a war story. You know what I mean? Like that, you have to have the losses to appreciate the wins when it comes to this stuff, man. And it's that for me makes it like even more fun. So
yeah.
Any other thoughts, Jordan, on the drop?
I'm just glad that it bought us a moment of celebration in an otherwise down-tempo podcast, because that was great. Like you, I feel like this is maybe the way that we should expect them to do it, because they did get a fair bit of blowback on the numbers collection. And it's probably from people who felt like this is kind of a snoozer if they were in for the wild stuff. So this seems like a happy compromise, right? You get both sides of it. You get to establish a little bit of your brand identity just with the basics, and then have some fun with the crazy designs that you slap on stuff and the really cool graphics, things like that. So I'm anticipating we'll see more of this kind of thing, which I think is great. And I'm very excited for that.
Yeah. And I think for the items that we were sent by 100 Thieves, by the way, thank you, 100 Thieves.
Yes, thank you.
You guys are going to be very impressed by the quality level, even compared to previous 100 Thieves favorites. I think you're going to feel it. Like I'm not just saying that. Like I've been critical about the direction in quality. I thought that it had been dropping slowly in recent collections, but I truly think, especially that hoodie Jordan's wearing, or the no camping hoodie or camping season hoodie, that I think is the single nicest thing 100 Thieves has produced. So
Bam.
You should.
Let me say one other thing, and this there's a joke that I'll make about us, which is we're an apparel company, right? Here we are, Cole, to talk about the LCS, and we've just spent the last 10 minutes talking about the apparel. We led the show with it. Let me just make a couple comments. One, I think that the people who are overly critical of the fact that apparel is something that the team makes a big deal out of and celebrates and gets excited about, they're missing the point, which is esports organizations are businesses, and they need to make money if they want to compete and buy the best players and form teams and compete in more titles. You don't get to do those things if you can't write a check. So I think it's fine, and I expect that it'll continue, that people kind of give 100 Thieves a hard time, because in some instances and at times, I think the apparel is probably one of the stronger, as John talked about when he was on the podcast. It's one of the stronger legs that the team has. But in my opinion, that is only to be celebrated, because until we see the team, or unless we see the team not taking the competitive side seriously, I have no problem with them going all out and doing everything they can to make the apparel as good as it can be, and to have drops like this one that generate an incredible amount of revenue for the team very quickly. So that's just my position on that. And I think it's good to remember that, especially because every time a drop happens, you see those comments coming back up, or people. It's like one of the favorite digs on 100 Thieves right now is like, oh, yep, have fun cheering for your apparel company. Those people don't appreciate the fact that you need to have a well-rounded company if you want to have a company that's good at any one of those three things. So I think I'm happy about how it went. I'm happy with the quality of the stuff, and I think it's a good sign, and that it will hopefully be mean that there's more positive stuff coming from the team.
Well said, man.
Thank you.
Very well said. I'll also add, it's nice to be a collection of fans that has some sort of identity. Like, okay, if apparel is thing for us, it's like, 100 Thieves like always has fire apparel. It's kind of cool. It's like kind of creative, very visible brand. It's like, okay, like, do you really want to trade that in for Golden Guardians fan culture? And while we're asking that question, what is Golden Guardians fan culture, please?
Yeah.
So there is that thing. Like there's an identity for fandom too, which for sure. you can't undersell the importance of that. So
yep.
Anyway, so since we are an apparel company, right? Apparel company, we just started, as Jordan pointed out. But let's get to the secondary purpose of the company. Esports, League of Legends. like we're all here for. Okay, we had a Friday game. Big surprise. I can't believe we played on a Friday against TSM.
Petition to only ever play on Friday, and preferably Saturday, but I'll take whatever.
You're running right into something that is actually a listener comment that we're going to bring right off the top. Let's go to listener comments, because we're talking about playing in the Friday game. Hale, at JL_Cage, you guys know as Hale, says, are we actually cursed to lose whenever we play the first game of the day? We have 0% win rate in the first game and 100% win not. This week we play CLG first game Saturday and GGS last on Sunday. We should be more likely to be CLG than GG's, but will the curse continue? And I have
Hale's
to say,
been watching Rec League.
Yeah, I love this. I absolutely love this from Hale. Yeah, of course. Look, the curses, you want to say they're not real. They're not real. Sports has shown us, though, that there's some potent powers out there.
In sports.
There have been some historically great curses that have happened. Who knows if the first game of the day curse is true for 100 Thieves. Jordan, I sure hope not. But hey, we played TSM on Friday, and that game was certainly cursed.
That was a cursed game, my friend. That was... it was not, I think you can only explain it by saying there was some active curse making the rounds. By the way, can we get Tim at Oracle's Elixir real quick to just add first game or not as one of the stats? Run that into our analysis.
Yeah, Tim, if you're listening, man, we formally request we'll subscribe to your Patreon if you do that.
Yeah, TSM Cole. Do you want to start us off? Kind of just
Yeah.
getting into
So
this one.
I just want to say, boy, howdy, what a familiar TSM game.
Oh,
All right.
just
We're
the worst.
we're duking it out. Back and forth. We've got this, actually we should have a name for this curse. It's not the first game curse. It's the Bjergsen curse. Bjergsen backdooring us at the end. It's like a pseudo backdoor, right? It's not like a classic full on everybody's at Dragon Pit and he goes, but it was
like you
kind of
wake
a
up
backdoor.
Wake up from wherever you are on the map, like and then you check out the mini map and Bjergsen's autoing your Nexus. No.
Yeah.
It wasn't that fully, but it was close.
But yeah, so it's like we get these like back and forth games where it kind of feels like we can get in it. Things largely seem to go our way when you measure on certain metrics. Like for instance, kills. When we, I think literally the whole game we were sitting on more kills than them. Lanes didn't seem to be doing that badly at all. Bot lane maybe. Bot lane getting beat pretty early was a thing. But just
Dika was getting thrashed.
Yeah. Right.
Like another jungler matchup that was heavily in our favor.
Yeah. It was just one of those things where it's like no matter how these games like play out, we just tend to lose to TSM. And I'm getting tired of saying that on the cast. Like I'm really getting tired of saying that on the cast. And yeah, I did want to say this because someone sent me a screenshot of this. That our inhib was 1 second away from respawning, which means they wouldn't have been able to finish off that Nexus.
Was it nameless?
It might have been nameless. Yeah. Someone sent it to me. So 1 second away before that Nexus respawn. And if I'm not going to claim that we're going to win that game, but we at least they were all in and we at least have a chance to fight. We probably could have cleaned them up in that fight. If I remember right, I think Someday had just torpedoed in on somebody and killed him. And like the overcommit forward is what opened the back door. Just a cursed game, man. I'm tired of this. Why is it always against TSM? Why are we always cursed? And Jordan, if we get to the playoffs and we have a TSM matchup, do we even have any hope? Like, no, we don't. Don't even think about it. We don't. If we
no.
TSM's always good.
That long.
Oh man.
It's
go ahead.
I mean, I'm so tempted to just chalk it and say it's Bjergsen diff. They'll go and lose a game where it's like, well, Bjergsen clearly wasn't the difference there, but for whatever reason, this is a thing in sports too, Cole, where the player just has a team that they transcend, right? Like they are on another level.
It's LeBron and the Raptors.
Exactly. Like doesn't really matter the circumstances, doesn't really matter if everybody on his team turns their brain off, he's still going to win, right? And I kind of feel like we're getting to that point with Bjergsen against us. Remember when Bjergsen, there was that rumor that he was going to come to play for our team? We wouldn't have lost this game.
Before the riot collusion and all that What? What'd you say? Bjergsen,
Cole,
TSM star.
Don't say that. Oh, wait.
Yeah, but he okay, so he does own us. All right, but let's talk about some of the other players. So first of all, Ryoma on Syndra has always been one of those like it almost feels like we're hiding him kind of picks, where like even like on an Orianna, which is a similar kind of style of champion in my opinion. People who are diamond at the game and have issue with that, sorry. But he just feels like hidden on Syndra a little bit. And one of the telling things is how many ults he throws out, and you don't get a whole lot of them out of him in this game. You don't see a lot of setup kills, but he's also not like egregiously like you don't watch the game and immediately go, oh, look, Ryoma is costing them this game. Like, this is bad. Like, it doesn't really look that bad. But he's just not doing the pressure creation that Bjergsen did. And especially the back half of the game, Bjergsen really came alive to always be chunking someone out or always be you know, it would be like teams fighting, and then observer goes, "Oh, look in top lane, Bjergsen is taking down a turret." You know, it's like we don't get that out of him. We've seen good games on Orianna. We've seen the amazing game on Galio when he had that like tank facilitator kind of approach to the game. But I always just feel like maybe he's hiding on Syndra.
Yeah, here let me try to break it down another way, which is I had like this profound internal conflict because I was watching their matchup, I was keeping an eye on gold diff, and I was like, there's as I kept watching, I was like, hold up, they both had a pretty quiet game so far, and there were points where Ryan was ahead CS, better stat line. I'm assuming more gold because but if I think this is the perfect game to show to somebody if they start and end their arguments for the quality of a player with their stat line in CS, right?
Yeah.
This is just a perfect representation of how it doesn't tell the whole story. And Bjergsen ended 2-0-3, right? He had only one more kill on a player than he had on a Nexus. So pretty impactful performance there. And Ryan was 1-1-5, and he had more CS. He had 40 more CS, right? But to your point, it felt a lot of times like Remo wasn't in this game. And I think so. It's so confusing to me because I have these vivid flashbacks when we have conversations like this about, and this is like a direct quote of a game that we watched him play in the past, right? He was casting the Orianna ult on cooldown.
Right.
And it was just always there, and it was always winning us fights. And so I know he's capable of being that kind of player. And then you see a game like this, and it's like I think you said that you saw one Syndra ult.
Yeah.
And I don't know of another, right? Now granted, Orianna ult has multiple purposes. It's not just a straight damage dealer. The Syndra ult is a missile that you use to delete somebody. And if you don't delete them, it's kind of like, well, it's like the Veigar R, right? Like, well, they're walking away now. So
yeah,
I get that they're used differently, but it's just there are these games where he feels invisible sometimes, and this is one of those games where I think we needed the difference. The Bjerg difference that we talked about really can be summed up by saying Bjergsen exerted his pressure and presence on this game, and Ryoma didn't, and he just couldn't find a way to. And that ended up, I would say, being one of the big differences.
Oddly enough, it's a similar story for Someday today, or I guess in this game. The Wukong pick from him was different, right? And he actually, when you're talking about like finishing with a decent stat line, it looks good on paper, like the way he finished, and I think he did do okay, but when you think about it, it's like, okay, did Someday have a 4-1-4 game? Didn't seem like it.
Especially when you look at the rest of the stat lines in this game, and you say, well, 4-1-4, that's the best stat line of any team. Well, in the contracts, you could argue 6-3-4. But to your point, it did not feel that way as you watch the game.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And it only felt like there were one or two times where the use of the Wukong was like as it was supposed to, like we saw him go after, I think, Broken Blade once, like pretty heavily. And he would just all in on somebody like once or twice, like, okay. But yeah, it just like, I don't know how effective it was. And then at the same time, you're getting moments like his bizarre trades in the beginning of the game where he was like opting into really weird trades that he lost very hard early on. And I mean, it had me wondering, like, is there something I don't understand about this? Like, is he proccing something like on some item that I'm not aware of as he's taking? Because it was just so
scaling by losing trades. How does this work?
It was just so unlike Someday, Yeah. But yet he finishes the game like on paper looking like he did okay, but eye test wise, it was like as a middling performance.
Yeah, I think that speaks to the quality of him as a player, right?
Sure,
he can have
our
a
standard
game
is high. Yeah,
he's middling effective and still leave with one of the most impressive looking performances on paper, and probably one that if it were another top laner, we'd say like, yeah, he had a pretty good game. it's not yet a bad game. But for me, it felt like I wasn't confident how confident he was on Wukong. Like usually when you watch Someday, if he initiates a trade, he wins the trade. And it just felt like he was uncertain about the limits of the champ, what he could get away with. Right. There's just times where it felt like, oh boy, he committed to this and it's not going his way and he has no way to uncommit. And so he's limping out of this fight, right? Or like barely dashing out of this fight. And I feel like that kind of was the story up until the later part of the game where it was all just death ball, spin through teams and do some damage.
Yeah.
But it was not. Here's what I'll say. I've asked that we see different looks, right? And so in a way, I'm glad that he played Wukong. I'm not convinced that it's ready yet, right? Like, I don't know if that's a pick that I'm adding to our dependable picks list for Someday.
Yeah. Looking down, like, so I want to finish talking about players a little bit and then make some general game observations. Contracts I thought was okay. He had a weird death under turret where he just like aggroed too much in a questionable way, whatever. But he looked fine. And
this
he
is the one where
he
he was on the I think maybe I'm thinking of the Lee Sin one where he kind of jumped back under a turret that was like one hit.
Oh yeah, that was a different one. I think this was a different one. But yeah, so he clearly outjungled Spica early on.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, I don't know. I think Contracts was kind of fine this game. But just like Bjergsen always has our number, TSM, like maybe the reason we struggle against TSM this year is because TSM has the other like always like weakness for us, which is Cody Sun into double lift, right? Where double lift just tends to own bot lane against Cody for whatever reason. And that was certainly happening in this case. And when it comes to Poom, like, because when that happens, you have to take the totality of what the two players are bringing to the table. I thought Poom actually in this game, he didn't really have a good game against Team Liquid, but in this game, I thought he was fine. Like he was doing the Lulu thing where, you shield someone up like crazy with wild growth. You get almost dead and then make your escape, right? Every time. Like Poom did that so many times. It just seems like, double lift has a thing where he just owns Cody Sun's mind a little bit. And so you've got bot lane losing basically the entire game and without any like pressure in mid. What do you do,
Yeah. Where does your pressure come from? And I think that is evident when you look at Someday, right? It makes a little bit more sense if you think, okay, so it's not coming from Ryoma in this game. Cody Sun was not feeling himself against double lift. And so it falls, you have two options, right? Someday or Contracts. And Poom obviously can do a lot too, but he's not going to carry the game on his own. I think for the reasons we've talked about, that performance was not in the cards, at least for Someday. And Contracts, his Olaf is better than I think a lot of other people's Olafs. But that's not a champ you can take over a close game with, right? That is a win more champ.
Yeah.
And if it's a real close game back and forth, I thought he actually played it really well and remained relevant considering he didn't have an insane lead. But that is not somebody you can look to and say, okay, Contracts, we're counting on you here, bud. Like you got to go in to a group of people who all five are approximately as strong as you or stronger and work some magic. It just doesn't happen. So.
Right. Now, I do want to make some general game observations. Like I was saying, one of the things is we did get what has seemed to be in the significant majority of games, something that we associate with this team now, which is a fighting spirit of some sort, right? In most games, TL, I don't know, but in most games, we don't roll over. And in this game, we had a couple of chances really to get back into it. Yeah. And we seized those chances, one quite decisively. and we fought towards the end, like, we're not gonna give this up. We know death timers get long. If we're able to get the right picks and win the team fight, then we can turn things around. Like, there was a moment towards the end of the game, Contracts like did his like torpedo onto double lift, right? Takes him down, and we counter engaged like the response from TSM. We wiped 4 of them with Bjergsen getting away with that much of his health, right? And it's like stuff like that is encouraging, right?
Yeah.
It's almost enough. But previous previous iterations of 100 Thieves would roll over, as we've pointed out. So I am encouraged by that, I will say. But like I said, we've seen what is the ultimate ceiling of this team when we played Cloud9, and the amount of decisiveness and tempo that we had in that game, we have not seen since. And especially, I thought, like, our movements around the map for this game were just late. And we saw a lot of like very obvious trading going on, like one side of the map being traded for the other. Yet it was always so late from us that it was borderline ineffective. Like, and so turrets stay up longer than they should. The recalls from TSM are getting in before ours, and so they're able to get back into position for whatever's next. And this was one of those games where they absolutely had tempo and agency, and we didn't, which I'm pointing out because it's the opposite of the C9 game, of the play style that we saw for that weekend, where we definitely are assertive. We're definitely the ones making the decisions, forcing the plays. And is it a conscious, like, are we still feeling out what we're doing, or are we like just happening to play this way against certain teams? We're just think, because we're gonna talk about it later. But that's something that I'm paying attention to is the tempo of these games, and just in the TSM game, we did not have it.
Yeah, let me make a couple of comments specific to this game. We saw after the game, I think it was Zix tweeted out, this was not the aggressive style we were aiming for, right? Something to that effect.
Good point. Yeah.
Something to that effect. So very clearly, it was not a change in game plan where they're just like, you know what, worked really well playing aggressively, so we're going to take our foot off the gas and cruise on home. So here's what I think happened. We talked about Ryoma. We talked about Cody Sun. Neither of them able to, generate a commanding presence in their lane that allows you to exert pressure on the map in places where you need to, objectives. Again, I'm going to get my games mixed up. I think this was the game where the Drake was the latest Drake of the split. Yes.
Oh, I don't actually know that.
So I think it was this game where there's no Drake taken until like 11 or 12 minutes. And what that goes to tell me is, what do you need to have to get the Drake? You need to have mid and bot or bot control, right?
Yeah.
You need to be able to commit resources to the Drake. So we just couldn't do it. Here's what I think happened. I think that Cloud9, what we saw is that we were able to generate enough pressure early and some, we created a problem in a lane that Cloud9 had to respond to and answer to, and that kind of messed them up, right? And it made opportunities for us to put them in bad positions, right? Think about the number of times that Niski got caught. We had several kills, not several, but there were kills we had in Cloud9's topside jungle. And that's because they were constantly walking back and forth trying to put out the fire that was top lane. So that didn't happen in this game. And there was no compelling need for TSM to do anything other than keep us right where we were, make sure that the Olaf didn't get snowbally, turn the Olaf into a late game, struggle champ, which, again, Contracts struggled well, but it's not how that champ is meant to be played. So I think it's the absence. And here's what I think we're probably going to be building towards. And we'll get into more of this in the general, I'm sure. You have to have, if you want to be an aggressive team, the pressure has to come from somewhere. And if it's not there, you can't play aggressively, because otherwise what you're doing is you're just kind of running into a wall. And if it's not coming from mid and it's not coming from bot, our options are very limited. And if you get someday on a champ like Wukong, I think that your options are that much more limited, because Wukong is not a champ who's going to dominate lane. He's meant to show up in team fights and cause a lot of trouble. So I think that's, if I had to put it on something, I'd say that's where it was.
Well, fair enough.
That's my hypothesis. Thanks for attending my pieces.
Defended successfully. Let's move on to the TL game, because I think just so much of our discussion is going to end up crossing into that general realm. So let's tie these games up and then spend the rest of our time there. Okay, Team Liquid, good team, man. They are a good team. They are not C9, but they are a good team. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the comp that we drafted into TL, Ashe, Lee Sin, Orianna, Jace, Karma. Difficult one to really execute, I think, is the standard line coming out of this game.
Yeah.
Which, you know, there are parts of that I agree with, parts I really don't. I'm more worried about something else that I saw in draft, which was Jensen on Zoe. I literally wrote, as soon as that pick happened, he will single-handedly win this game.
There you go.
I wrote that right when it was locked in. And I hate that ominous feeling that this is an inevitable thing that's going to happen. And then the rest of like how everything plays out just like holds that up. I just hate it, because then the whole time it's like, well, did we ever have a chance in this game?
Right.
Perplexingly, right, the early game was super strong from us. Until when was it? Like it was like 20 minutes or something like that. Like it went 15, 20 minutes. It was, we were looking like we were in a great position. But the snowball melted. So
yep,
how are we to understand this game? And yes, chat has already talked about, yes, we're going to talk about third Drake fight. I promise. We're going to talk about it.
Yeah, it's on the list. Cole, I'm going to go back to that tried and true, age old, I didn't like the draft. And I look at a couple things. One, I think this is a draft trying to do a couple different things, right? Jace, we've seen someday be great on Jace, and we know he can be. He is never going to outpoke or even keep pace with the likes of Ezreal, Zoe, Bard, right? Like,
yeah, even Bard
queues.
When core JJ is there.
Yeah, and he wasn't building damage, but my point stands is he can stun you, and then you're a sitting duck for poke. Like, doesn't get easier than that. And even the Ornhorn, right? This team had so much ability to engage. They didn't even need engage tools. Just kill you from beyond engage distance, right? So I look at Someday and I'm like, he's out of this game. He's got no chance. Even if he's landing a shock blast, he's not going to outpoke your three players who can really create problems for you. And tellingly enough, right? Your Graves, your other ranged champ, albeit a much shorter range, he got his kill in like the final push of the game. So he was basically not asked to do any team fighting.
Yeah.
He just kind of PvE'd. So I don't love the Jace. I didn't like.
He did have a good game in the past on Jace. Just he did. Contextually in this one,
it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit with what. And this is, I think, might be part of it. I think by the time it became clear to us, like the Zoe was a later pick, right? And at that point, TL was basically just like, "Yeah, we're all in on poke. We're gonna get you guys, and you're not gonna step to us." And they were right. So we didn't know that, right? When we picked Jace, which was this is the last round of picks.
Yeah.
So maybe we did know that, but we weren't committed to that approach, and we couldn't keep up with them. And the Karma, Poom had a great game on Karma against Cloud9, speeding up that speedy Olaf. Lee Sin doesn't need as much speed, I'd say, so less useful there. But again, just like I look at our team comp, and I'm like, who is he speeding up? Like he had some poke too. In the Cloud9 game, he was hurting people with his splash. It just wasn't doing anything. So again, it feels like we tried to do a couple different things, and because we didn't commit hard to one of them, it didn't feel like it came together for me.
Yeah. It was interesting how the casters repeatedly pointed out how Contracts was outperforming Broxah in the jungle, despite what should be a matchup where Contracts gets dominated, which just adds to the frustration of this game, right? To see how it goes. It's like, oh wow, he's actually like winning, and he's actually, eating up that jungle and getting the right positions. But the problem is just like nothing. Like we look okay early on, and then that we throw away like every aspect of the lead we've built, which you cannot do in this comp, because if this comp is like a never fall behind comp. Okay, so scaling versus the early game, if you're the early game team, you can never fall behind scaling, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's the whole point. That's what it all boils down to.
Right.
Look, I say this every time we talk about draft. I know I'm not smarter than these guys when it comes to the draft. Mm-hmm. All right. I just hate that we find ourselves in this position every time. Now, fortunately, we learned that the early part of this we did quite well. I don't know what that means. Like, is this the challenge that we need to learn how to build the bridge? Because it seems like usually with this new lineup that we do okay early.
I mean, I feel the same way you do, and I have the same reservations about really getting critical about draft, because I don't know. I don't know. Not only that, we have incomplete information.
Right.
So we don't know the considerations we're bringing. We've very clearly seen that there have been limitations that the team has worked through in the past, specifically in regards to draft, that are different now that we have two different players in the lineup. It just creates a different drafting strategy, right? So that we have evidence of that. So it's not like the reason we played Not so much wasn't because Zix loves Not and is convinced that Not is the best support champ in the game and it's busted and you just got to give it some time, guys. Like, so clearly the picks that we're making and the someday carry thing, the list goes on, right? They're based on things that they're seeing that we just don't have visibility to. It's very easy to sit back on draft day and say, if you would have picked X champion, this would have been an easy game. What were you thinking? And the answer to that is they're probably thinking about things you don't know, right? But here's what we always do know is while we're not smarter, and chat, I'm talking about you too, so none of us are exempt from this. We're not smarter about this than the professionals, like it or not. The professionals are directly competing against other people who, in many cases, are smarter than them. And I think we got outsmarted. I just think this is one of those examples where this is a TL, this is a JAT. This might be JAT diff, right? Like their team comp, I think they were built in a way that the early advantage we could generate was not enough. And TL's a good team, right? Against the lesser team, maybe this early lead is enough to carry us through. TL's too good. Their comp was, it neutralized so much of what we wanted to do that I really believe that this is a really good draft from TL that they executed as exactly as they needed to, right? Even looking at the Lee Sin, like who's he kicking? Who does he kick? You can kick Ezreal because he's going to shift in QSS and it doesn't matter. So like you become a human in Torpedo and you have a 1-4 and 2 stat line, right? That's your game at that point. So that's how I think about it, man. It's a bummer, but that's kind of where I'm at.
It still just doesn't address the early lead that we build. You know what I mean? It's like, say we're going to talk about the dragon fight. say that dragon fight goes the other way. Like, how long do we maintain that lead? How long are we able to extend before the scaling comp takes over? We don't know the answer to that question. The one misplayed fight could have turned the whole thing. Mm-hmm. So it's just so frustrating. I'm not willing to like write off completely the draft, like especially when you're talking about Team Liquid has players that I would argue, have a wider proven champ pool than we do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think Ryoma's champ pool is obviously smaller than what we usually see. Contracts, I don't know. He's probably limited to more aggro junglers, though that's debatable. Cody Sun seems to be playing more of the same than a diverse range of champions. ADC is kind of in a place where you have the ultra meta picks anyway.
Yeah.
So if you're hamstrung in the draft by what tools you have available and the other team has like just more tools,
yeah,
how much can you really do? But I get at the same time that we've done way different drafts, like having Ryoma on something like a Galio, which have proven to be super effective. There are just so many like other weird questions about it though. Like for instance, Ryoma, a frequent target of criticism in the mid lane. This dude was up like 800 gold on Jensen, like pretty quick. Like he had a significant gold lead on him. He had a little bit of a CS deficit, but he had the gold to really stay there. A team as a whole was up 2,000 gold at 12 minutes. Like that's a big gold lead in 12 minutes. Dang man, what do we do? Like there are so many pieces of this that you could talk me into it going a different way and we'd be just fine. And when you consider who we're playing against, that could possibly be super encouraging.
Right. Yeah, like if we hadn't 2-0'd the week before, we might look at this game and be like, hey man, this looks like progress. We had a lead.
Right.
You know? Our new guys drawing bans, right? Olaf and Italy banned first round. So, you know, like those are positives. You can't take that away. And I'm kind of creeping into general topics now, but like I think that that's the hard thing is how do you make sense of how do you contextualize this with what happened the week before?
Yeah.
And it feels to me like this is part of the puzzle that we've not yet figured out. And we talked about this last week. I find myself saying that a lot lately, Cole. How can we recreate this consistency? Once you hit the peak, right? The next thing you do is you find a way to reproduce that reliably week after week and against opponents who have a varying degree of looks, right? In some ways, C9 is a very hard team to beat. I'm not gonna say it's impossible because somebody else beat them, but I think in some ways they're a little bit more predictable, right? Like TL they've got Core JJ, they've got
Core
Jensen,
JJ,
they've got
man.
Broxa.
Core JJ is
Core
so
JJ
good.
is he carries through support. Like that dude is unbelievable. And I don't know what game plan you can like. I think for C9 we just said out aggro the aggro guys, and we did it, and it worked. I don't really know. Like I don't feel like I understand how you reliably prepare for TL right now.
Well, the thing is, it's like Team Liquid has the play style that's the same every time, right? They do go with the scaling comps every time. It just ends up being which champions do they select along the way to get in there, and that's where it gets difficult.
And I think that's part of it for me is you can be a late game team with a lot of different looks. Bard is a very different late game team than somebody who's playing Braum, right? It's a completely different look. So I think that's part of it. And this was all about the poke, right? This is not death ball. This is your death ball does not get to form here. You can't stand too close to each other because the Zoe splash damage is going to kill you. Yeah. And it's going to be one shot, so watch out. And if it doesn't, the Ezreal, True Shot Barrage is right behind. So it's tricky. And I'm not surprised. Like, here's what I'll say. Two great teams, TL, Cloud9, at the top of the ladder. And am I shocked that we didn't have as reliable a way to beat TL as we did C9? Like we shouldn't expect that you can just take whatever you did against C9 and throw it at TL too, right? They're just different teams. So in that sense, I'm not shocked. And we tried the aggro thing and they kind of had the solution, right? It worked for them this time.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the Drake fight. It's generally felt out there in the public opinion world that that third Drake fight is the rather inexcusable fight that we lost, our hesitation around the dragon, everything. So it played out. Both teams came to fight for that third Drake. They had a ward over the wall into the river that was really good and was missed by us. So they had a little bit of an extra area of vision that Jensen decided to occupy. He landed a bubble onto Someday, and we countered and took Impact and Jensen down, in part due to a nice shockwave from Ryoma. So that was really good. But that pulled us off of the Drake, right? We didn't end up going into it. So when we eventually came back to move to the Drake, that was when they wiped us. And the way it kind of played out was Jensen was in that area around the upper entrance to the lower river, if that makes sense. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And the rest of the team was kind of in river around the side. The way that this has been portrayed, this is just me giving my opinion on this. The way this has been portrayed is that this was like, oh, just go commit fully to Zoe and you win and you turn it to the rest of the team, or leave Zoe back there and go fight the team or whatever. But it's like, you've got carry here, the rest of the team here, make a decision, like choose.
Right.
And I think and we didn't make a choice really.
Yeah. It's like A or B. And we said, how about C?
Right. And the longer that you stall that out, the more you're going to get poked, right? Which they do poke extremely well, as we pointed out, especially Jensen, who lands seemingly every paddle star in the universe.
Got a homing paddle star upgrade.
Yeah. So, and he did, and that turned the fight. They killed Someday, Ryoma, and Poom, and the dragon, and just erased the game. The thing that I think is being overlooked is what Impact was doing on the Ornn. Because if you watch him, he's like hovering around out in river in between the two like kind of entrances. So where Jensen is and the rest of the team is. And he's got that searing charge, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if the team advanced, like say they made the call to all in on Zoe, I'm fairly sure he could get 2 or 3 players knocked up immediately.
Yep.
Off
that
of
hurts too.
Because he's in the exact right space. So I don't think it was that simple of a decision to make, as many have been saying. At the same time, you have to choose.
Yeah.
You absolutely have to choose. And the hesitation, we likely could have taken the dragon earlier after we got the first kills, before we gave them enough time to reset. So the hesitation, and because of the hesitation, actually, we lost more than we probably would have lost if we had a failed Drake take earlier than that, right? So it was literally like gold lead back to 0 at that point, and almost no way forward for us. So that was like, that play had outsized impact on the rest of the game, which really sucks. Which really sucks because it made the rest of the game feel like a matter of time. Mm-hmm. When, as you alluded to, I think we had like some positive stuff to pull from this whole weekend, but it just put a damper on the whole thing. So, dang, man, what a way to lose.
Yeah. I have flashbacks to, I believe it was Bjergsen on Zoe, who caught Cody in the river, it was kind of a similar situation, right? And absolutely deleted him. So all kinds of trauma from that Zoe around the Drake.
Yeah.
And we kind of played it the only way you couldn't, right? Like, you talk about the odds of a play, you go for it early, 30% chance they re-engage and wipe you, right? Now, if you go for the Zoe, maybe there's a 40% chance that Ornn is positioned exactly as he needs to be, and he knocks you all up, and then Zoe deletes you with the Q, right? But if you do nothing, so I think it is that sometimes that is our greatest challenge still, is finding the voice needed to act decisively. And I know we can do it. We've done it before. It's not like we've never seen this team do that. This is one example where it didn't happen. And we paid the consequence, right?
Yeah.
So.
You talked about feeling the frustration. We should make the observation that there was one player in particular on our team that felt a lot of the frustration. That was Poom. This game was Poom's first, like, truly not good game. Okay. Mm-hmm. Poom, even from his first appearance in the LCS, has looked totally prepared, and he's even looked very good at times. We mentioned even in the loss to TSM, doing that Lulu job fairly well. In fact, I should say well, not fairly well. In this game, he truly got bodied, right? And he was being found by Jensen. He was being found by Core JJ.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to overreact to it. And I think this is one of the times that the community has really gotten it right. Like, I don't see anyone being like, oh yeah, like Poom, like just totally outmatched. This is bad. Like, it was a rough game. He gave away some kills at inopportune times, but no one's like pulling the fire alarm on him after this, which is great. Like, I love that. And that's honestly, it almost feels like a new energy coming from the fan base, because I feel like in the past, a lot of people have been, ready to pull the alarm on players, like before we even really get a chance to see them. So I just wanted to mention that to say that it was a bad Poom game, but I'm not worried about Poom at this point. Which I think I'm going to use as a bridge to the general topics, because I want to start by saying that I'm getting increasingly worried about Cody.
Yep.
So we have mentioned, this is, I think, the 4th week where we've said, Cody didn't really have that good of a weekend. And at first it was, Cody had a bad weekend. That's fine. He's had them before. Second weekend, it was, he had another bad weekend, but I think he's earned the trust from us that we know he'll bounce back. Third, it was like, man, Cody really not doing anything. And now we have another weekend where he seems to be getting outplayed and slumping. I think this is starting to actually be a thing. I don't think we can write it off at this point. So what are your thoughts on Cody? How do you think there's a problem? And if there is, do you think this is a short-term problem or longer-term problem? And is there any sort of action that we need to take at the moment?
I want to start by saying it's possible that we've given I'm having a hard time thinking of how to say this. It's possible we've given too much of a pass to Cody, which, I don't want to be like, I don't want to retcon all of my takes and say, I was just giving him the benefit of the doubt and now it's clear. I'm thinking about things a little differently. And it's this weekend that's led me to do that. Now that we have more players in this team who are capable of truly carrying. And really, I'm kind of thinking primarily of contracts, right? In the last couple of weeks, he's had those kinds of performances where it's like, oh, okay, this is the player that they need to watch out for, or that they have no answer for, and now they lose.
Sure.
We've always talked about Cody as being like, he's the late game guy, right? He's the cleanup squad. He shows up. And I think at least I won't speak for you, at least what I have done in my head is assigned him the job of finishing what someday has started. That's a pretty one-dimensional role for somebody to play. And I think it's time that we start asking what more we could get potentially from that position. Like, I think that's where I'm at, which is, yes, Cody can do that. But I think that's just one type of job that your ADC can do for your comp. And I think we need, as we're finding, we need an ADC who can also contribute in different ways. Because if all your ADC does is show up and win as the game is presented at the later stage, I think it's a little bit too easy to neutralize that person. And that's kind of what I'm starting to see. And also, not only is it easy to neutralize and kind of prepare for it, like, if you don't need to worry a lot about Cody until the late part of the game, if the late part of the game doesn't materialize for his team, you don't have to worry about Cody at all, right? And I think that's kind of what I'm starting to see. I want to know if we have other, either if we can put him in a position to create that pressure. And this is what we're not seeing and what I talked about in the TSM rundown, he's not bringing that threat, right? He's not bringing the challenge to the other team on responding to a problem early And I think it makes it harder for people like Contracts to then exert his influence in lane on objectives and things like that. And everything I've just said about Cody, also true for Ryoma, by the way. I know this is not about Ryoma, but I think I'm starting to see that they are in a similar situation and similarly positioned within this specific roster, which is we don't need more people who can win the game later on for us. We actually need more people. If we're going to be an aggro team, we need more people who can generate threat early. And I don't know that that's Cody's play style. I don't know that he can do it. I don't know that they're asking him to do it, but that's a big question mark in my head.
Yeah, just reading through a couple of listener takes on Cody that I think go along with what we're saying. Sandwich said, what are your thoughts on Cody? I was under the impression that he just been a bit of a slump this split with how bad the team has been. But this past weekend makes me think it might be more than a short slump. Does he need more time with Poom? Is it a team dynamic, etc.? And Unreal Dreamer said, Cody is someone I call a streaky player. From what I've seen, he's either on fire or pretty cold. Curious if IRL affects his in-game, or maybe state of team chemistry might affect him. That's a guess, though. And well, I disagree with that latter part. It seems like the team likes each other just fine. And I know that he was personally friends with Stunt, but at the same time, it was quite clear that a change needed to be made there. And Poom's had pretty universal respect and acclaim. So I doubt that would really be the case there. I'd be surprised if it was. It's speculation, of course, but yeah, I agree that this is turning into more of a thing for some of the reasons that you said, right? Where we need to have someone with carryability earlier. There is a question of like Poom, right? For whatever reason, I think it's likelier that maybe Cody just got used to hiding behind Stunt and maybe is just rusty when it comes to playing more aggressively or playing with the expectation that you can keep up and win.
Yeah.
Than it is a lack of synergy with Poom. Which, I mean, I guess in a weird way, they're kind of the same thing, right? Like if Poom's like, no, come on, like let's play this normal, let's be assertive, and he's not used to that, then that's one thing. But I don't think it would necessarily be a disagreement on how to play those lanes. I just literally wonder sometimes if it's him being rusty at like having a more competent support. All due respect,
right. Yeah. I mean, and here's something else that we should acknowledge, right? Poom is playing the map. He's going places. Cody's in lane by himself at times. So, I mean, we've kind of turned bot lane into weak side, right? More than we had in the past. And so that's probably worth mentioning, right? Like if what you're going to be asking him is to really dominate his lane, not fair to ask him to do that if it's a 1v2 while Poom roams and gets work done. And that's if that's your plan, great. As fans, I think we should acknowledge that and just appreciate that you can't ask somebody to do it all.
Yeah.
Right. You can't both be weak side and unless there's someday and also take over the game. So yeah, I do want to be fair in saying that, but I can't imagine that longer term that is going to be a reliable thing to do. I think you got to have at least two lanes that are carrying that threat. And right now it feels like we're getting it not from mid, not from bot, which I think is something we got to figure out.
Yeah. Well, so speaking of things we got to figure out, let's go back to Ryoma. You brought him up. There were a couple of listener things I do want to hit as we go through his status too. Panda said, I know Ryoma likes to play aggressive, but I actually do see more success with him playing supportive mid champs like Galio. He should play champs that could synergize with Someday and then give Someday and Contracts the burden of playing aggressive carry champs. That seems reasonable to me. Scyther Ulti says, how are you feeling about Ryoma? I feel that his laning, even just his last hitting, which is a basic fundamental, trails behind that of other mids like Jensen. If any mid can get 1 CS more per wave, and they'll be up 30-ish by 20 minutes, it seems to consistently happen. And that's something that I've pointed out in the past too. For whatever reason, it just doesn't feel like he's found his footing on most champions. And we are so quick to trot out this Galio thing because it worked once against a good team. Yep. Right. We haven't seen it 2 times, so we don't really know. on paper, it seems to make sense. And then in the one example we got of it, it seemed to work. So I'm down to see that more often for sure. I'd caution against, just chalking that up to like, oh, like, I don't know why we're doing this. This literally works every time. Like, again, just a reminder, we don't know what's happening in scrims and we don't know what they're playing in those situations. So I don't want to overdo that portion of the take. But it does seem to me that when we're talking about Ryoma's player development, we've given him that he's had over a year. Well, he's had a split and a half, right? Over a split and a half to develop. And we've been really patient with it as it's evolved. And he has shown steady improvement, which is good. A couple games where he really like flashed some cool stuff, which was awesome, though it wasn't right away given. I wonder though, if it does feel like now we're seeing more of a plateau from him. The upward trajectory doesn't seem as obvious to me as it was before, even though he has had, some games that have really stood out. The Azir game against TSM, the last round robin, was one of them. And the Galio game against C9 is another one. So to me, I feel like I'm in a place with him where I want to see if those things are repeatable and sustainable. And if there are other options that do that, like I don't think we've seen him play a Twisted Fate game, if I'm not mistaken.
Got banned out.
It got banned out against him. So maybe that ult is also something that helps him be a facilitator and travel around.
Yeah.
We need to see some more of that, but I do think like our expectations for Ryoma need to keep going up with time, as they should. Now it needs to be reasonable. We don't need to expect him to be like Niski or Jensen this year, right? But the progress needs to happen, and it is less obvious to me that progress is happening. So in terms of things to keep eyes on, that's ranking pretty high for me.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Here's one thing that I have in mind when you talk about him as a facilitator. I don't know that that's the hardest thing for a mid laner to do. And I think if that is the role that you need mid to play for your team, I don't know that warrants an import slot, just to kind of put it plainly.
Yeah.
I think that if you're now, and I don't know that that's a viable strategy either, right? Like it's important to have a mid laner who can do that, right? Who can play the facilitator role. Niski does it really well. He does it all the time, but he has different looks, right? He's a very multifaceted player. It feels like a lot to invest to have that, right? To have somebody show up and make sure that they can help get your jungler going, or to show up and help add to a gank in the bot lane. So I would need to think about that much more. Like if the point we get to is that is kind of his role and what he does for this squad, I think it just potentially increases the level of scrutiny there. And in some ways, because it's probably that much easier to play around somebody who is very clearly fulfilling that job, right? Like Ryan was not stunt, and I'm sure I'm not trying to say that this is a 1-to-1, but I think stunt fell into that trap a little bit, which was everybody knew exactly what to expect from him. So if what we're saying is he's not gonna be our carry threat, he's not gonna have the type of pop-off games that people need to be worried about, that much easier to prepare for. It's a potentially limiting factor that you've got to, I mean, again, your comparison set there is filled with a lot of people who can do everything, right? At least to a certain degree. So that's my concern.
Yeah.
Is I don't want to have him into a smaller box that is just that much less impressive when compared to some of the other options available at that position.
Yeah. So, and I know you just brought up the import slot thing towards the beginning of that take. And I know that we have backed him a lot. Like we've really encouraged people to chill, to give it time, to watch the progress. We know it's taking up an import slot. And I still think that this is coherent with this, because for all along we've been saying, let's give it time. Let's give it adequate time to evaluate. We're getting to the point where that evaluation is more and more complete. And I do think it's a fair point to expect more out of your import player than a domestic player. Quite frankly, you know, that's why imports are valuable, because you can get someone to play who offers you a higher level than something else. So we're getting to the point where, we're going to need to make a decision about him. It will obviously fall right to what's possible with other players that, you know, may be available. Like if Jensen may become available at the end of this split. Right now I'm seeing that as an obvious upgrade, but there's a lot of things to consider. Now I'm still like willing to ride out this entire split with Ryoma. I think that's fine. I do want to see him given more opportunities on the enabling, facilitating champions, get a better look at his champ pool. But, you know, before we said he was kind of hamstrung by jungle and by support. The moves we've made at jungle and support appear to have been extremely positive. Okay. Right. So now we've kind of addressed that part of the equation. So now we need to look more directly at him and what he does. And I think that's totally fair. So as we move forward through these last 3 weeks of the regular season, we're going to pay closer attention, have a little bit higher standards, and hope that improvement continues to be made, and that the speed of that improvement accelerates a bit, in my opinion. So
yeah, and it's entirely. And here's the reason you don't. I'm glad you said like he finishes the split. I think that's absolutely right. Let's remember, this squad is still relatively new to playing with one another, right? And it's entirely possible that he becomes more comfortable playing with this mix of players and looks different next week, and then the week after that. And by playoff time, he is consistently turning in strong performances. That's entirely possible. So I think at this point, the risk is just way too high to try to change anything now. And nor do I see a really super compelling reason to do so. I'm feeling much more confident that this squad is a playoff squad and that we're positioned well to make it there. If we 0-2 this weekend, let's talk again about that. But at this point in time, you know, we will have, I think, the information we need towards the end of this split to say pretty definitively if he's our guy.
Yeah. Now, let's do this. I think that what we have failed to do on this podcast so far is contextualize everything that we're seeing in the grand scheme of things, which we just did with players, but I want to do that on a team-wide side. Then we'll do listener take lightning round, and then predictions for this week, and call it a night. And so chat, be thinking about who you want to raid, by the way. Okay, so there's been a point brought up, I think, in chat several times. I think I just saw someone point it out again. So it's worth bringing up. And one of the comments we got on Twitter was from Just Rocket. He said, "We went 2-2 against the top 4 teams in the league. Give us that option 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we'd bite your hands off." That's what he said, which is a funny way of putting it. I've never heard it that way. And that's fair. Like, I don't want to lose sight of the level of competition that we've faced. I'm not entirely convinced that, say, FlyQuest is super amazing or anything like that, but clearly Team Liquid and C9 are a cut above the rest. TSM sitting in third. And those are teams that, at least for significant portions of the game, we were matching with. You know, that was a thing. So that is good context. And Jordan and I specifically mentioned there is almost zero chance that this past weekend we would play like we did against C9, right? Like, that was the unusual ceiling, not the reasonable expectation. Right. And we even said, if we 0-2 this weekend, I'm not going to be worried about it. And I'm not. I don't want to overreact to that. Everything to me is progressing as part of the plan. It's a slow moving thing. It's not quite a rebuild, right? But it's a development process. Mm-hmm. And the roster moves that we made have only been in play for 3 weeks now. And, you know, that's just the way it is. Like, we have the fortune of having 8 teams getting into playoffs. I think we're sitting in 8th place at the moment. But even sitting in that last playoff spot, I feel very comfortable that we'll make it. So between now and then, well, I'm just going to say between now and then, It's just like, what can we figure out about refining our style and knowing what our options are when it comes to the strategies at our fingertips. Go ahead.
Yeah. And I just want to add on the topic of this being developmental program and, positive progress, right? If you're feeling uncertain about that, I think look no further than this fact. We decided to make a change mid-split, which is always a risky maneuver, using only talent we had in our own system. And we have two very, what I would say are definitive improvements to our LCS team. That is an accomplishment in itself, right? That needs to be commended and appreciated. And I think that speaks to the integrity of the overall project that's going on here. It made even more impressive by the fact that it's coming from an unlikely source, right? It's coming straight from 100X. So that is the kind of thing that should build confidence even further. I mean, consider if the people managing this team and program have the full arsenal of tools available to them that become available in between splits and at the end of the year.
Yeah, right.
There's going to be that much more opportunity to make intentional moves that improve our squad. So I'm still feeling very positive. And I think, just because this new, LCS roster that we threw together, in a really kind of quick manner isn't going 4-0 against the top 4 teams in the LCS. Okay. Let's keep our heads here. So it's good to just remember that I still trust the Papa. It's still working. And just because it's not working every game doesn't mean it's not, right? That's how this works.
Yeah. So that's all fair. And it's unfortunate that we allocated not much time to that, and we did it towards the end of the podcast, but I think it bears repeating that we're learning this new roster. We're currently sitting in playoffs and within striking distance to move up, facing the easier part of the remaining schedule. In fact, we've literally gotten the best teams out of the way already for the second round robin. So from this point on, we might be able to climb. And if we don't, we'll at least continue learning lessons along the way. That should help us when playoffs actually come, so that's the thing. All right, let's do listener take lightning round for some of the remaining stuff we didn't hit. Our good friends over at C9 Bodied asked us, what would be better for the team, coach staff structure changes or roster changes? So I think is it more important to look at players or the staff? He says definitely an argument can be made for both, but curious to see what y'all would take. In this situation, I'm looking at roster changes before coaching staff changes. I know that the draft irritates people. A lot of the times it seems like we're losing draft, so that's a thing. Okay, I'll grant you that. But at the same time, this is the coaching staff that did 100 Next, that successfully brought in changes. Everything that they've done for this split has worked out in a positive direction from where it started. So, benching Meteos again was surely a tough decision, especially considering the PR. And moving Poom up essentially from amateur up to LCS is also a risky thing. Both of those moves have worked out very well. Now, I mean, I think everybody, we had a long conversation about Ryoma. I think, that's probably the next place to look, and maybe Cody Sun is right there with him. So yeah, I think there's some positives on the coaching side, coaching and staff side, I should say, like those in charge of the program. And those outweigh some of the potential roster issues that could rear their heads. So that's my take. You have anything to add, Jordan?
I do think we're being fair in talking, as we did during this episode, about Ryoma and Cody Sun, because let's remember, these are guys we have a split and a half worth of data on, right? So it's not that we have a full new squad and we need to do a hard reset on all expectations. Like when we talk about roster and potential to consider, like, are there other improvements we could make, or what would be the next improvement if we were to think about that?
Yeah.
It's not like you start with a blank slate. You do consider all of those things. And of course, you give it time so that you have a chance to see if it gels. And that's why we're not saying that we need to make these changes for next week. Come on, what are we doing? Bring up the other 100 next guys.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're in universal agreement there. At MVP Simmons season said, did beating C9 give fans too high of expectations? And he's focusing specifically on the community.
Mm-hmm.
Said, saw way too much negativity after a game where we had a great early game and a bad draft decided it. Against TSM, if the inhib respond 1 second early, we likely win. So yeah, I kind of mentioned that TSM thing. It's not a slam dunk, but at least that possibility was there. But when it comes to C9 giving fans too high of expectations, I think that is true for some. I've seen an encouraging amount of people who have been like, you know what, like that's just where we are right now, and we can't expect to play that way. I've been personally encouraged by the amount that I've seen, but there definitely are some people who were, mentioning us on Twitter, talking about changes and how, we need to get new coaches in and stuff like that. So there is a little bit of overreaction, probably due to the C9 victory.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you're right on there. And Jordan agrees, I think. So
my silence will speak for the fact that I think you got it.
Okay, let me toss you one more then. And this is from the guy whose name I always wonder if I should be saying online. Burnt Cooter says, hoping the boys make a run and show some grit, but feeling more and more like this is a 2021-2022 team than 2020 currently. Too many inconsistencies with Raum and Cody this year, and 2 fresh players. While they did improve the team, doesn't seem to be enough. Wait and see vibes. Jordan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's generally where I am. Do I think that this is our Worlds roster, and if we don't make it, it's a huge disappointment? And why can't we get the most out of this lineup? No, not at all. And honestly, it's kind of refreshing. I'm going to say, I love the fact that this is not a swing for the fences. If it doesn't work this year, scrap it all, blow it up, and try again next year and see, kind of like maybe you can cobble together a bunch of players from some academy team who were good once thing. I'm excited about that. So I think that's where I'm at. This is next year or the year after that. And we talked recently about how we've locked in some of the key pieces. Someday's got his contract, right? And a lot of the guys, we're seeing really positive things early. And so I anticipate and expect, and if it isn't, then that's a problem, that they'll just keep getting better, right? Certainly Poom is an insane upside. So yeah, I think next year I'm feeling good about next year. And I think there's still a lot to look forward to and be excited about this year too. So I think I'm generally there with you. And not in the kind of way where it's like there's this sense of dread about this year.
Right.
There's a lot to look forward to in both sides. But
yep.
I'm not in this position of like, if we don't win Worlds, what are we doing?
Yeah. Yep. Very nice, man. No, I can't add anything to that. I'm going to let that fly. So, okay. Upcoming week, we have on Saturday, not a Friday game. Everybody, which kind of sucks, honestly, because I usually can't watch live on Saturday.
Exactly.
Probably be on VOD Squad Saturday. But we have CLG, who's in 7th place, sitting at 5-7. Jordan, your prediction?
Win.
My prediction: win.
Dubs.
I think that this is a team that is certainly in reach of us. They're barely ahead of us in the standings, yet our current form, I think we can be competitive with pretty much everybody outside of the top 2, top 3. So definitely thinking we can pull off the win against CLG. So that's both of us with a win. Jordan, Sunday versus Golden Guardians in 4th place, tied with a lot of people in 4th place at 6-6. Your thoughts?
Also dub.
And do you have any reasoning?
Well, you know how I feel about losing to DeMonte, Cole.
Exactly.
My soul can't take it. I cannot. Although I do see that in their win against Dignitas, he played Galio again, and they picked up a Yumi. and an Ezreal. So let's not give them that comp, please.
You said exactly what I was gonna say. Okay, so here's the thing. That's my caveat. I think we win against Golden Guardians, but we need to make sure those picks don't happen. No Galio for DeMonte, no Yumi, no Ezreal. I literally think we have to prevent that from happening for us to win, but I think we will get the win. So that's right. Chat, you heard it correctly. Cole is predicting a 2-0 weekend for 100 Thieves. Very rare. Very rare. Enjoy it. But I really do think we're going to 2-0 this weekend.
Yeah. We got a great shot. Yeah.
The optimism is there. Okay, and speaking of optimism, let's close with this. There was a moment from the heist that I wanted to shine some light on. Very wise inclusion, in my opinion, from Mark when he was putting this piece together. But when Nadeshot called the team afterwards and Contracts was there to answer the call, Nadeshot gave like a mini speech about how excited he was about the win and the energy level that it's given to the fans and the org. And I thought that inclusion of that message was exactly right. I thought it was very, very wise from Nadeshot. And I think it was very in touch with what's happening. And that gives me a lot of optimism myself. So I love the fact that the org is feeling, energy coming from this team. And I agree, like I'm signed on for the energy coming out of here, and super awesome of him to make himself visible to the LCS team in that way. I know he's faced some criticism of not appearing to be as invested in the team. So very smart to put that in there for a variety of reasons, but I think it's dead on. Like, I think there's plenty to be excited about. I think I have a new sense of energy about the team, even though we just lost a couple of frustrating games this past weekend. We've got 3 more weekends before playoffs, right? Yep. And that's 6 games, 6 opportunities to get better, 6 opportunities to position ourselves for what will be the run that tries to get us to Worlds. So I'm actually excited for this. Actually think the playoffs will be compelling for 100 Thieves fans. And I'm ready for it, man.
Yeah. I'm with you. I agree with what you just said. I also am excited. I feel like there's a lot we don't know yet about this squad. A lot of upside, and that's a good place to be, right? So I'm gonna have fun this weekend. I hope my frustration meter is lower. As we talk through this episode, I think my frustration meter has gone down a bit. So it's good, it's cathartic. But yeah, I mean, these are high stakes games. Let's not be mistaken. You can live with losses to TSM and TL, who are sitting towards the top of the table. You can't. If you want to play in the playoffs, if you want to have a chance, you got to get wins against these teams. Like, these are the ones who decide if you make playoffs or not. So I would say these are almost higher stakes than last weekend. Doesn't feel that way. They won't be as exciting, probably. They're not going to get as much attention, but this is the thick of the playoff battle. And if we want to stay in there, we got to make sure that we're picking up wins in these types of situations.
Yep. All right. Well, that is going to do it for tonight from us, from your dads. This has been Hunter Talk, powered by Rivet Energy Fuel. And kids.
Oh,
sorry. Did you have some?
So stick around.
Yeah, we're ready. Yeah, don't leave. Yeah. Kids, as always, we love you. We miss you already. Don't forget to write your dads.
Take care.
All right, raid time, everybody. Looks like we're going to go to Kenny.
Ooh.
Who is, I think Quavo, right? Is his Quavo Ken. Let's do it. All right, everybody. Stick around for the raid to a classic 100T personality on the COD side. We miss him dearly, and we're ready to see him again. Thanks for watching.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for hanging out.
Goodbye. And here we go.